And Professor Dawkins thinks that all the intellectual Christians that he's talked to, from the Archbishop of Canterbury to all kinds of people, including the previous Pope, that they're really cherry-picking the Bible for the bits that just happen to fit, but they don't really know how to read the Bible, which is quite an idea. There's the problem of natural evil, which I mentioned that my colleague Neil holds up. There's the problem that it looks like the whole universe, including biology, runs according to blind natural causes that are described by the laws of nature. And so if they're blind, then there's no purpose. And if there's no purpose, there's no God. Human beings seem to share an extraordinary percentage, 97 or fluctuates around, but of 97% of their genes with apes and other species. It's really quite amazing. Religion is just the product of evolution. We can find all that we need for morality in its evolutionary roots. And so we go on. Faith and reason, I'll just mention a couple of them there. The persistent view of the new atheists is that faith is what you believe in the face of contradictory evidence. Pretty amazing statement. How is belief in God a rational belief given the best standards of rationality of the natural sciences? Science is open to challenging all its beliefs, but religion is not, is it? And then, of course, having got that far, there is always the Galileo affair. So, and these are just some of the issues that need, around which one would like to be fluent rather than not. And of course, we're not going to get to all of those one night of theology in the pub, however good the scene is, and it is very good. I must say I'm very impressed by it. So maybe what I'll do is to take up a couple of issues, and then, so I don't run it on forever, and then you might like to take up questions with me. How would that be? Would that be all right? And then before I end, though, I'd like to come back to some reflections on the Atheist Convention. So if I allow you to manage the time, is that all right, Jonathan? And when you think it's, say, 10 minutes before we should end, I'll switch to the Atheist Convention, something like that. Well, that's my wife and I, Cecilia. We're enjoying Catholic hospitality here tonight, and happily so. So let's start with the Galileo affair. Why not? So Galileo was had to recant his Copernican views, the views that the sun was at the centre of the world, the system of the world, and he was confined to house arrest in Pace, just outside of Florence. Cecilia and I risked our lives with a mad Italian taxi driver driving us up this incredibly spindly, narrow road to go to his villa, and I was sad not to be able to go into the villa, but there it was. What were the issues, or what is the issue for me? Books are written on this, and I'm going to do it in a couple of minutes, so I'm concentrating my mind very carefully. So there are many levels to this issue. There are many political issues in the Galileo affair. As you know, the Catholic Church has its own capacities for politics between the Jesuits and the Dominicans. I see someone with shock and horror there for a minute when I said that. Not to mention at the time all the fighting between Catholics and Protestants. In 1632, when Galileo was forced, 1633, when he was forced into this recantation, we'd been 15 years into the 30 years bloody war between Protestants and Catholics, which produced the secular state as a result. So nothing much to be proud of here as Christians. But nevertheless, certainly not a time when Pope Urban was going to be feeling disposed to some layman, however eminent, telling the Church's teaching authority how it should interpret the Bible. And this is what Galileo was, in fact, doing. In 1615 he was called up by Cardinal Bellarmine because he'd been promoting Copernican views, and he was advised solemnly not to do so, or that what he could do was he could teach it as a hypothesis. The standard view was that the Earth was at the centre, the Sun and the Moon and the stars and so on moved around the Earth-centred universe. This was the teaching of the Catholic Church. This was the teaching of natural philosophy, Aristotelian natural philosophy, and Galileo was not to disturb that. Now, the rumour got around after that interview, which was quite amicable, and that Galileo accepted. The rumour got around that he was suspect of heresy. So Galileo went back to Cardinal Bellarmine and got a letter saying that he was in good standing as a Catholic. He popped it in his pocket. Not that long after, Bellarmine died. Nobody else knew that Galileo had this letter in his pocket. What Galileo and Cardinal Bellarmine didn't know was that in the folder of the Inquisition, the Galileo folder, there had been inserted another document with a rather more demanding constraint on Galileo not to teach in any way this teaching, but it had no signatures, an illegal document. So, funny works at the crossroads already. So, nothing much of, well, many things of interest, but the next bit in the story comes when Pope Urban becomes Pope, and a great friend of Galileo. Galileo has a number of audiences with the Pope, eats, drinks, passes the time, intellectual. Pope Urban is an intellectual in his own right, a poet, a scholar, and Galileo thinks that he has a good understanding of the Pope. And the Pope warns him that yes, it's all right for him to be thinking about all these things, but he must do two things. He must ensure that he remains hypothetical, which means that you could propose a model for the way the universe works, well, not how it works, but a model that will actually give you all the data in the right, it will make all the right predictions. And in those days, that's what astronomy was, providing models that could give you the right predictions of the movement of the stars and the planets and so on. And the other thing that he had to do was this: he had to respect this very favourite teaching of Pope Urban, and it was that, look, God could produce the phenomena that you observe in many, many, many different ways, Galileo. There's no way that you can tell us which one God has chosen. Remember that. So, a theological argument for, at the very least, modesty. So Galileo retrieves work that he's been doing on his discussion of the two great world systems, the Copernican one and the Ptolemaic one. The Ptolemaic one with the Earth at the centre, the Copernican one with the Sun at the centre. He writes his dialogues between three characters, one of whom is an old-fashioned Aristotelian, another one who's the Copernican, and a third party who's the independent person. And so they go through all the arguments, including all of Galileo's telescopic observations, and it's quite amazing. When you actually see the little telescope by which he produced this revolution in the National Museum in Florence, it's quite stunning. And so he produces this dialogues recounting all the observations and all the arguments, and right at the end he appends another argument, which is based on explaining the movement of the tides. And this is where Galileo gets into trouble for two reasons. The old-fashioned Aristotelian goes by the name of Simplicio. Don't need too many marks for knowing what that means. And Galileo puts into the mouth of Simplicio the Pope's favourite argument for why you can't actually go from the phenomena to what's really going on. Right? That's for philosophers and theologians to talk